to you later.
Okay.
How's things? There we go. Hey, Sheldon. It.
Oh, hi, Bev. How you doing? I'm sorry, I had mine turned off. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, we can let him in. I may be in and out. I have some phone calls I'm dealing with right now, so and I don't have any presentation tonight, so
Okay.
I'll just listen though in case something comes up.
Okay. Yeah. If you could do that, that's fine.
Yeah.
So no
Okay.
problem. You'll be able to let people in as they filter
Yeah,
in.
I'll watch and do some stuff. Yeah, I'll be
Okay.
able to watch.
Okay. Sounds good.
Alrighty. All right, I'll start letting them in.
Okay. Hey, Joe, haven't seen you for a while.
I know it has been a while. How are you, Bev?
Good. I understand you had fun with your coaching though.
Yeah, I hadn't done that for gosh, a long time. It was fun.
Hi, Terry.
Hi.
Alice. I'm keeping track of who all is here. And Emily. John. Brian. Okay, and let's see who else is in here. Amanda. Okay, anybody else come on recently? Lauren? Okay. I think we've got most people here. Someone else coming in. Brian, okay. And it looks like Laszlo. Okay, good. We're getting there. Good crew this today. I'm just noting who all's here, you guys. That's why it's taking a little bit. Okay.
And I
Okay.
do have it pulled up on mine, so the recording will show who's here too. So
Yeah,
either way,
does it show everybody up on there? Sometimes it doesn't show everybody. Well, hello, everyone, and this is our last meeting of this school year. So first of all, thank you for all of your input, your attending, and just thank you. Your time has been appreciated. So just Thank you again. Okay, we're gonna start with in looking at the minutes, was there anything else that you guys saw needed changing, or is it okay? Okay, is there a motion to approve them? I love this.
Motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Thank you. Okay. All of you in favor, would you please give me a thumbs up? We're good. Okay, cool. Okay, we're going to go right in.
I just want to say, I apologize. I'll be watching and listening, but I do have some calls and stuff, so I will do double dipping here. So, and I'm not presenting tonight, but I'll listen. So, okay.
So, Sheldon,
Uh-huh.
you still have not figured out how to clone yourself?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
We'll get
Okay.
there.
You'll get there. Okay. Okay. I imagine most of you would like to figure out a way to clone yourself at times. Yep. Okay. Okay, we're going to start with budget, and Brian, we'll start with you. So.
Good afternoon. I really don't have anything to show you. I'm just going to run through some calculations and things and kind of where we are in the process. The information that is out on CDE's website for funding for next year, they have what the Joint Budget Committee presented or proposed back on March 24th, which is different numbers than what CDE is showing based off their last run that they did in March. But in going through and looking at the funding formula that was on JBC, I kind of went through and did my own calculations because the numbers they have in there for us are incorrect. They shorted us in our assessed valuation. The numbers they're showing for our property tax and specific ownership tax don't even agree to the total program number they're showing, which it should. So we don't really have a clean source of information from the state at this time. But based off of our assessed valuation and because that's our main funding source within general fund is property tax and specific ownership tax. So in looking at that, we're looking at projected revenue at this time of $13.9 million. It's down a little bit compared to year-end revenue for the current year. And that's just because revenue sources, we don't know all of our revenue sources yet for next year. Like this morning, I signed an application for supplemental gifted and talented grant that we apply for every year. We don't know for sure if we're gonna get that fund. So, I mean, there's different numbers. We don't know yet if we're gonna get that funding next year. So that those numbers aren't shown in our preliminary revenue numbers right now within general fund. One change that is showing right now compared to current and prior years for next year. Right now, it is looking like we will get to keep all of our categorical revenue. So categorical revenue is ECEA or special ed within general fund. We should be able to keep our transportation reimbursements, our CTE, our CTA, career technical ed reimbursement. In the current year, we're sending back about $342,000 in money that they sent us that we have to send back. Like I said, for next year, as of this moment, everything they're showing, we don't have to do that right now. But again, we haven't seen the School Finance Act run yet. They have introduced the law bill, but they haven't disclosed the SFA yet. So hopefully we should be getting that information in the next week or two, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I think last year they got it out to us first week in May. So that's why I'm using our assessed valuation from December that we used to collect all of our property taxes this year. So I don't think that's going to change too much. If anything, it will probably go up a little bit. The state's showing it down about $25 million, which I don't agree with. So that's why I'm using a different number than what JBC presented and proposed to the state. One thing that is out there, I know a bunch of people with the inflation number that is figured into the funding calculation. CDE is using 3.5%. And the reasoning behind that is in legislation, the increase or inflation that is used from the prior year. So it's looking at a year ago. It's not looking at our current inflation. That number won't be used until next year. So that's why it's at 3.5% instead of 7.5, depending on what numbers you're looking at currently. So that's why the increase in their formula is only 3.5% because it's in arrears. So they're looking a year prior, not in the current year. Another thing that is in the proposal as well is the buy down of the BS factor, or the budget stabilization factor. In the numbers that they have in there for JBC, they're proposing a $250 million buy down in the BS factor, which is why we'll be able to keep our categorical funding. But our BS factor is one of the only ones in the state that's actually going up when everybody else is going down. And that's because we're local funding, all of based off of where our assessed valuation is and what we assess in mills. We collect enough money locally to cover the funding formula. So that's why ours is a little bit different than everybody else's. So in total, within general fund right now, like I said, with projections based off of December 21 AVs, and that we're looking at about 14.7 million in total revenue within general fund. So we're looking at about 225,000 more in revenue compared to final budget for 22 for next year. Some things we're working on and have built into all of our staffing tables and things like that is the $1,000 increase base within certified. We're also looking at updating our classified hourly tables because right now they really aren't competitive, and we've had several vacancies throughout the year because we just can't fill the positions based off of what our current pay tables are set at. And a number of neighboring districts at mid-year modified, so mid-year current year modified their hourly tables to make sure every single one of their hourly employees was making at least $15 an hour. Our current lowest hourly wage based off of our table is $13.63. So we're under that $15. So we're working to try to figure out to get that shifted so we can fill the positions we've had vacant all year and be more competitive on the pay side of things for our classified employees. Because currently we're down 2-3 bodies within the kitchens, and we might not have some of those people come back next year if we don't look at changing those tables. So we need to get that changed. So we're working through that right now. But overall, based off of the different runs and things like that, we've looked at staffing for next year across all funds, because we, like I said before, I've been talking about general fund revenue, but we do pay quite a bit of staffing out of federal grants and things like that. We're looking anywhere from 13 million to 13.2 million for salary and benefits for next year. And again, that's subject to change because we've had a couple of resignations since those numbers were ran, and we'll probably have a few more come through. Just because we usually have some people decide to leave, you know, towards the end of April, early May, and get jobs in other districts, things like that. So that's kind of where the big thing, so a majority of what we look at every year is the salary and benefit side of things, that since that's 85% of our budget. So that's where a lot of our money is tied up. So yeah, that's kind of where we are right now. Like I said, I haven't seen anything from the SFA come through, so I have no idea really where legislature sits on what they're looking for school finance for next year. Like I said, I have what the Joint Budget Committee proposed and what CDE has shown, but again, it's kind of up in the air right now. But the thing that will affect us, because I haven't seen anything to where federal grants will be looking to change next year. We should be getting similar funding there. We also have our ESSER 3 funds, which were approved for the next 2 years, that we have some FTE and other things written into as well. So we have that out there. So yeah, that's kind of where we are right now. We have been working with our health insurance. We were looking at a very significant increase, but we have been able to get that down to hopefully where we'll just have an increase in administrative costs and not have increases in premiums and things like that, but we're still kind of waiting on final numbers with that. Also within that salary and benefit number, we did work in an increase to the monthly employee defined benefit from $650 to $675. So that's shown and reflected in those numbers I said for the salary and benefits. So we're looking at increasing that as well, just in case for some reason the premium might change $1 or $2. We have a little bit more capacity for employees and give them a little bit more benefit to help offset that cost. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where we are right now. Like I said, we're kind of waiting on the state to get us the funding side of things. I really haven't even seen projections for federal grants or seen any of that come through. Those have remained fairly consistent and don't have huge swings within those. So I think we should be okay there. Is there any questions? I know I'm throwing big numbers and a lot of information at you.
So with the local districts that have raised their classified staff numbers
Yep.
to at least 15 an hour, have they been able to retain? I know that's been an issue with most of the districts, that getting people in the classified, and have they been able to retain more that way?
I'm not 100% sure because we haven't really met. I'm actually meeting with all of them on Friday. The last time we met was in January, and they just imposed everything 3 weeks before. So I'll find out a little bit more on that this week when we go through staffing and things like that, and things as a whole, all the Northern Colorado school districts are looking at. So from what they said, it seemed to help. But again, they're also short-staffed in areas and still trying to fill positions and things like that as well. So,
Yeah.
but they, in the 3 or 4 districts that did do that in December, they did seem very positive with everything. So again, it's something we need to do. I mean, we're lagging behind in that area. So yeah. So hopefully Friday, when I meet with all the other business directors for Northern Colorado, I might have a little bit better idea then.
Yeah.
because like I said, last time we discussed it, it only been implemented
Mhm,
for 3 weeks.
mhm.
So
Yeah, okay, that'll be interesting. Yes, looks
Um,
like Julie, okay.
So when you said you threw $1,000 onto the base salary for a lot of certified staff, that's like a less than a 2% raise. And so my concern with that is, you say the state factored in like a 3.5% factor in there, knowing what inflation is. I don't know what percentage of the staff commute. But it seems like with a less than a 2% raise with like $1,000 thrown onto the base as a figure. Like that's just concerning in general, because like a less than a 2% raise just seems like from a marketing perspective, that's not a great figure. Is a way to keep and retain staff in a place that's hard to recruit, where nobody can really afford to live. And so how do you come up with, like, we just threw $1,000 onto a base, and how does that figure, or how do you just calculate that, or where does that come from?
that actually came through meet and confer. And that's just the base. And then also it flows through, because we're not planning on freezing steps or any of that type of stuff this year. So, I mean, it's a $2,000 bump on certified. I mean, it's not like you said, it's not 2.5%.
Well, it's like less than 2%.
Yeah.
Well, what I read in meet and confer was that they were just kind of told that's what it was, because that's what could be afforded, was less than 2%. So I'm just like, when I read those minutes, what I read was that's what the district could afford. And I'm like, where did that come?
I was given that number. I didn't really see it until the notes as well. So that's what I built into the thing. And then the tables are the tables. So it's just an increase to the base to try to help with that.
So as when you get the new numbers, will you be able to adjust that at all?
The increase to the certified base,
Mhm.
we can look at it, but again, we don't know for sure, like I said, on the funding side of things.
Well, that's what I was wondering, when you get more firm funding.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something we look at every year. I think what we've increased the base, $8,000 in the last 7 years or so, something like that, 6, 7 years. So that's one we've been working on as well, to try to get that up to be more competitive with neighboring districts as well.
Mhm.
Yeah,
We got a very good raise last year. Wasn't it last year?
when we did the $2,000 bump at the 6,
Yeah.
11, and 16, yeah.
Yeah, even somewhere in the recent past, we've gotten a pretty good raise, so.
And that was in addition to your step raise?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really, Julie, since I'm on meet and confer, if I could really quick, first of all, we've been in conversations with Sheldon about what's going to be feasible to do as far as a raise this year, because we are looking at the whole spectrum of how that works. I do have some bigger numbers that explain bigger data sets that explain a little better where our district is overall in comparison with other districts, both in our area and as well as being our size in the state. And I'd be happy to take a second and chat with you at some point about that. We are trying to get the best possible resolution out of that, but again, it's a budgetary process and we don't have the final numbers there. So, but I do have some other numbers that reflect the growth we've seen over the last 7, 8 years and our position overall in both the state in total and also in districts of our size.
Yeah, so, and with the 1,000 increase to the base plus steps across the board, That's increasing our salary and benefits by about $340,000 compared to the current year. And that's before we even look at modifying the classified hourly table.
Any other questions on this or comments?
Brian, I appreciate the note about addressing the classified wages. That's one thing that's been a concern and has actually come through Meet and Confer a couple times, because we are looking at our kitchen staff and we feel like that situation is precipitous, to say the least, when we look at kitchens that have one employee and they're should be staffed to 2 or 3, and we're
Yep.
kind of watching to see what happens there. So I appreciate that we're making some movement on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the analysis we have that we did last time was prior to pandemic. So, I mean, some of our classified positions are in line, but our hourlies, most of them are paras and food service and things like that. They were behind even when we did do the increase last time. So that's why we're still trying to get them kind of caught up in a better position. So.
Amanda, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, I was just curious about outside of staffing. I mean, the inflation pressures on fuel for, our transportation and food consumed at the school. Those are you guys able to use a factor higher than this 3.5% for your internal needs or plan for
Yeah,
that?
for overhead and things like that. We have a pretty good idea of what those are. The one that's going to be fluctuating is going to be the natural gas. But we do have programs in place since how we purchase our natural gas. It's at a discounted rate just because of the volumes and things like that. Fuel, because we buy so much in such large quantities, since we kind of share pumps with other governmental entities in the valley, things like that. So we are able to offset some of those types of costs. Our electricity costs have gone down because I think everything in the district now is LED. The only things we don't have LED lights in are the football field lights, but everything else is LED district wide. So we were able to get that put in basically at no cost through grants and things like that. So we've been able to kind of reduce some of those types of costs. Food is a big one. In the current year, the state is supplementing some of those types of things. I mean, I think I just got a distribution from the state for about $21,000 to kind of offset some of the supply chain issues and things like that for the current year. We do know, as of right now, it does not look like it'll be free feeding for kids next year. The state is not planning on continuing that into the next school year. So I need to go back and look at numbers pre-pandemic, because we basically doubled all of our distributions this year and last year with the free feeding. But yeah, our food costs have gone up. We figured that into the current budget, and we kind of have, I wouldn't say a good idea, because we just don't know with supply chain issues and with the conflict going on in Ukraine and things like that, how that's going to affect some of our global pricing and things like that for grains and things like that. So we do have some room to move into that, but we don't want to pull away from staffing and things like that. But we do have some capacity. We did try to pre-fund some of our capital projects and things like that in the current year, so we wouldn't have to move money next year to cover some of those capital projects that we have coming down the pipeline, and things like that. So that will help us with the increase in our overhead costs and things like that.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Yeah, thanks, Brian. I know every year at this time you don't have all the numbers, so it's an estimate.
Yeah, and the big change, I mean, our property tax and our specific ownership tax, those probably won't change. It's going to be the categorical revenues. So it's either we get to keep about $340,000 or we got to send back $340,000.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we won't know that actually probably until December of next year, because when they do their mid-year adjustments and true ups and things like that, that number usually changes.
Right. Yeah. But so far that looks good at the moment.
And everything that they have with their last runs and projections and things like that, it is showing that we get to keep that money for next year.
How often do we have to send money back with that?
It just depends on where we fall with student counts and that type of stuff, and where our local share falls and things like that. And what the student count is statewide. So
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
because you have to figure in the state shares and the BS factor and all that type of stuff, and that fluctuates depending upon state enrollment.
Yeah.
And our enrollment is actually going down for the funding formula, because we had bubble classes that graduated 4 years ago. So they're starting to cycle off, and we're starting to have smaller October counts using our formula.
Any projections on incoming kindergarten?
I have not heard. I need to get with Aaron and John, or Aaron, and kind of see kindergarten roundup and that type of stuff, and kind of see where that's at.
Yeah.
I think our senior class is a little bit smaller, so it shouldn't be too big of a change. So,
Kind of what we have this year.
or actually, our senior class is actually bigger than I thought. Sorry, we were at 97 for this year.
Oh, okay.
So, because we've actually been gaining kids in middle school and high school.
Kids that were last year that were homeschooled, is that what you're getting?
It's kind of that, and then some kids moving in with grandparents and things like that that are in middle school and high school.
Okay, well, thanks for doing that. I know it gets tricky at this time of year when you don't have all the numbers, so.
Yeah, and like I said, our staffing is going to be fluctuating in the next few weeks too, just depending upon if people are going out and looking for jobs in other districts and things like that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. That's helpful. Okay, so we'll move on to Laszlo with federal and special programs and just a general update.
Great. I'm gonna share my screen, and hopefully this works okay. If for some reason you guys aren't seeing it, just let me know, because when I hit share my screen, I can't see anybody on the Zoom meeting. So and then I'll definitely take a break. I'm going to talk about special education first, and then federal programs, and I'll take a break in between, for questions and stuff. But if you have questions in the middle, just somebody kind of, I won't be able to see hands raised or anything, so just kind of speak out. That'd be fine. Okay. All right. So hopefully this works okay.
Yep.
All right. You see my screen, so hopefully you'll see a PowerPoint in a minute. Okay. So kind of want to, for those of you, I think I know everyone on here, but if not, I'm the Director of Student Services. And my role here in the district is I provide supervision for special education, Section 504, gifted, talented, all kind of fall into those areas, as well as work closely with Sheldon and Brian and John and Aaron and the rest of the principals on our title funding. And so I'll start by talking about special education, and then I'll move into some of the title pieces. So kind of just by way of knowing what this data is coming from, our special education data, most of this is all year to year, and it's all collected on December 1. That's our special ed count date and staff count. So everything you're seeing is pretty fresh. We do gather some end of year data, but for the most part, December to December is kind of how everything is reported. So, so the first thing I want to kind of give you a picture of is our disability areas right now, and these are real numbers of students in our system who are identified with disabilities and are receiving special education services. And you can see kind of by this breakdown that this is kind of where we want to be. We have a fairly big group of students with learning disabilities. The developmentally delayed is really a disability category that's used for preschoolers and young learners. I kind of call it the kitchen sink identification. It's not as specific as learning disabilities or other things, but we are allowed to identify young learners, preschoolers, 3 and 4 year olds with this disability, with the idea that either they were able to make growth and exit special education, or later on in upper elementary, by the time they're usually second grade or so, we're looking at, is there something else that's impacting that student? As well as our speech language, which is another kind of big area. Then you can see we're kind of spread out. We have smaller groups of students in what I call the low incidence disabilities. That's autism, significant emotional, and other areas. The other area that we're seeing a little bit of a larger group in, but it's not surprising, is the other health impairment. That does pick up students who have anxiety, depression, mental health, as well as ADHD and some of the other kind of physical types of disabilities that might manifest for students in school. This is our ratio. And so this doesn't mean that every student who has a disability is in a 5.5 or 6-to-1 ratio, but that's where we are district-wide, which is actually really good. Right now, it wasn't like this at the beginning of the year. We had a lot of openings, and Brian was talking about difficulties in hiring classified. That was really highly impactful for us this year, still is, but we're in a much better place now. We're able to provide supports for students that need them. There's still some areas that we're struggling to meet that, but like I said, we continue to improve, and we've made strides to be able to gain and train people, and we're going to continue to work on that. But this is kind of gives you an idea of what it takes. This is just our teachers and our paras across the district, including preschool, serving our students ages basically 3 years old to 21 within our system. And then we have other folks that are also required and needed to serve students with disabilities. Some of these are employees, and others are private contract folks that work with us. And so you can see it's just kind of a big range of different staff. The newest being our school social worker in the last year, or actually 2 years now, and you met Courtney at the last meeting, has been an additional help, as well as the BCBA, which is a person who was on a contract, but now has become an employee. So we're really working to get her to support our students with significant behavioral challenges across our system. This is a number that we report, the least restrictive environment, which is basically where students are educated. And to give you an idea, the state really set this mandate at 80%. So they are really looking that you're educating your students with disabilities, that you're educating 80% of them in the 80% or more environment or category, which is mainly in general education with some supports in the classroom and maybe some small group pull-out types of things, all the way down to the most extreme setting, which would be separate or outside of the school. And you can see from this, our data is looking pretty good there. We're just under 90% of our students being served in the classroom most of their day. So that's what we want to see. And then we measure, of course, their success in that environment to make sure that is working for them and that it's providing them the supports they need.
So the students that are getting in the separate setting, are they in school at all? Are they in the gen class, or are they?
They may be placed in a separate school. We have students that are placed outside of our school in a separate school, or well, student, or we have several students that are what I kind of call it a hybrid scenario, where they may be doing some tutoring outside of school and attending partial day and that type of thing. So for the most part, they are with the idea there that we're trying to reintegrate them back into the school that they're. So we're right now, we have a current student was receiving their services outside of the school by a tutor. We have a great partnership with the Learning Place, and I work closely with them. And that's an environment we're able to use. It's a smaller, quieter environment for some students that struggle with being in the classroom or around peers. And like an example there is that students now transitioning back into the school, and is more than half of their day now, well, almost their whole day back in the school. So we do a little bit of that. And we also have students that might require placement outside of our district.
Do we have very many students that have severe physical disabilities?
We do. We have, we're actually we've seen a little bit of an increase in that over the years. We have definitely several students at each building that have significant physical needs. And this also doesn't include students on 504, which would include like students who are diabetic or have other issues that don't require special ed. I'm sorry, you're looking at the 504 slide. The slide before, when we were looking at disability areas, wouldn't have included this. This does include, this slide, of course, includes all those students that are also receiving supports on a section 504, in addition to our special ed students. So you can see kind of the breakdown there. We do see those numbers increase as we move up. Part of that is just the testing and the different types of demands increase as you move into middle school, high school. So that's why we see more students identified a little bit later. We're also seeing a lot post-pandemic, a lot of anxiety, depression.
Yeah,
issues.
I was wondering about that. Yeah,
seen quite a few of that. Quite a few students with that are requiring more support. So this is kind of this is actually my favorite data point that I collect. It's our post-school outcomes, and it's required by CDE to do this. And basically what I do is every summer I get a list of students and I call them and interview them. And I typically interview their parents a little bit too. And these are students who have graduated and then have been out of school for an entire year. So this summer I will be calling the students who graduated last summer. And then by, continuing. So it's always a year behind, obviously. And there's a set of interview questions, and then I ask them, talk with them, and then report that to the state. But we also get our own data from that. And so that's what you're looking at here. And you can see we're a small district. So some years this is 3 or 4 students. This year it was a larger group. I think I had 10 that I called this year, which was a little bit of a larger group for us that graduated the year prior with a disability at the time when they graduated. And so we ask them questions, and this is basically what they're doing. We have 25 or 1/4 of them attending some type of higher education institution, whether it's community college, four-year college, technical school, culinary school, those types of things all are included with any further education. We had a big chunk of our students not doing that, but employed, either full-time or part-time. Many of them not in family businesses, but there were a few that were working in family-owned businesses. And then the other activities are students that may not be doing either of those two things. We had a pretty significantly disabled student that aged out, and at the time of the call was still basically at home, helping at home with chores and living with family at home, but had not engaged in school or any employment outside of the home.
All right, when you are interviewing those guys, are they giving you feedback of ways that the program might be improved a little?
Yep. So we ask questions about what helped you, what would have helped you. We ask about services, like we work closely with Foothills Gateway, who provides adult services. We work closely with the ARC of Larimer County, who provides advocacy. We work with Division of Voc Rehab and SWAP are all kind of in that same thing. So there are a lot of different entities and agencies that we start to engage, especially students with significant disabilities as they get older and graduate or age out of school services, to be able to access whatever adult life is going to look like for them. And yeah, a lot of those questions do give us, we don't get that necessarily reported to us, unfortunately, but I do get that because I do the interviews. So I'm able to kind of informally gather that data as well.
So students that are going into higher education, are they getting support from the institutions they're at too?
Yeah, they may be getting support from they would get support through like the Disability Access Center,
right,
at the institutions, but a lot of them are also could be getting support from SWAP or DVR because they will help with supporting them and getting into the school, maintaining in the school, so they can access adult services at the same time as well.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Yeah. All right, good questions. This is probably the biggest talk of this year from my perspective and of special ed is our evaluations. And I have to tell you, I didn't do a year-to-year comparison. I'm going to look at trying to get some of that data in the future here, but I will tell you, we have had more evaluations this year than I've ever seen in all the years I've been here. Those evaluations you're seeing are not students who are on IEPs that we're reevaluating. We have to do that as part of our 3-year, every 3 years, we have to reevaluate all students that are on IEPs to see if they continue eligible. That's part of our process. These are new referrals. These are new students. So to give you a perspective, we have just under 100 students identified in our district with disabilities. This year, we evaluated 31 students new for questions around, do they have disabilities? Now, I do blame the pandemic for this, because I think what happened is we had an entire year of not evaluating or not being able to. So I think we'll see this. I'm going to be monitoring this. I think we will see this change, but it is something to keep an eye on. And the other piece of this that is also going on is there's a lot of work at the state level around dyslexia, and parents are becoming a lot more aware of some of these things. So I think that's a good issue and a good thing to be happening, but it does impact our system. So, especially the small system. So we'll be monitoring that. The 8 Child Find students are all students who were 3 or 4-year-olds in our community who were identified, evaluated and identified, and then come into our system for preschool service. So, and I put the hours in there because it is a highly impactful thing, and it's something that I just watch, in particular for our special ed teachers and our service providers, our speech language, our OT, PT folks, because you can see there, this was just sort of I looked at I just kind of took a general approach to what does it really take beginning with paperwork and communications and meetings, all the way through the evaluation process, through the identification, and then developing an IEP if they are identified. And it's a lot of hours. It's about 20 to 25 hours per student. So it gives you kind of a sense. And here's the other thing. Since I've made this slide, we've had 7 more evaluations come forward in the last 3 weeks. Or 5 more, sorry, 5 more. All were driven by parent requests and parent concerns. So it just an interesting data point to watch and to be aware of.
Yeah.
Little piece on our gifted and talented. Here's our numbers here. And I just found out we just screened, and I'll explain that in a minute. And I think Mr. Leha's on here. He was involved with that process. But anyway, this is our current numbers right now at each level. And these are students identified as gifted and talented in some way, in some area. And basically to the right are kind of the big pieces we've been working on. This is an area we've been working a lot on. We had a GEM review last summer, which was the state came in and did a monitoring review with us, and it was a really great experience, and we learned a lot. And from that, we developed some big overarching goals that we're working at each building on this. And so that's what those 4 pieces are. We're working on our identification, making sure we're identifying students correctly, but also really making sure we're identifying all students. So we want our numbers of students who are Latino to match. We want those numbers to match. So if 20% of our students are Latino or whatever, we should expect to see 20% of our gifted population be matched that. And so we're really looking at those numbers to make sure we're not missing students. And that's really the big focus there. We've been doing a lot of work with developing plans, in particular at the high school, and connecting those to the ICAP plans at the high school. And then we've been working on consolidating our data, which we moved everything into our frontline system over the last couple of years, and that's been very, very consistent. We gave teachers access to all that data this year, so they have that. The next step is really our training and our PD, and we have some ideas, but we haven't dug too deep into that. But that's our next area, because a lot of these students are in general ed classrooms, and we want our general ed teachers to have the best support they can to be able to meet all the needs of their students, but in particular, in this scenario, the students that they may have that are gifted and talented.
How do you identify the students?
So the students are identified through a body of evidence approach, which includes testing, includes interviews, it includes what else? Parent input, staff input, of course. And basically we use the MTSS system. So we monitor students.
Mm-hmm.
We monitor, we're looking at their MAPs, their CMAS scores, and really you're looking for, and then this year we were actually able to also look at WIDA and how fast they move across the WIDA, the WIDA standards.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's for students who are English language learners. And basically we're looking at a body of evidence. We're looking for students that are in that higher percentile kind of consistently over time. And then we go forward with a process of identifying them.
What percentile are you? I'm sorry, go ahead.
95th percentile.
95th?
Yeah, that's the state. The state kind of set that out. We do have some flexibility when we're looking at WIDA in other areas, but generally we're looking for that 95th percentile. Now we also do a screening at second grade, which we just did a few weeks back before the break. Sorry. Mr. Leha was involved with that, as well as the other second grade teachers, and I was involved, and Rachel Graham, who helps us a lot, does a lot of this work with gifted in our district. And we do that screener every spring. And we did the full COGAT this year, which was the first time we've done the full COGAT, which was a 3 days of testing for the second graders. And from that screener, we'll also do identification. That gives us a chance to start looking at what students are moving up, and that's a cognitive assessment, basically, if you want to look at it that way. And I just learned recently that we have a pretty large bubble of students at that grade level that we're looking at, which is unusual, but also we'll be spending some time, as I think next week, starting to look at are there students in there that we need to be looking at identification for. So
when I was at Pooter, we had to have 2 out of 3 nationally normed tests, is what they were looking at, and they were looking at 95% or higher with 2 out of 3, which was a good thing, because one year I had a student that came in. It was before we had really kind of set this up. A student came in from Texas, and they had scored really high on their state exam. But when they started in the program, it wasn't a good match for them. It was, and so, yeah, being able to get a body of evidence is really helpful on that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
That's a great question. We're trying to get away from, obviously we have to meet the threshold of assessment and be able to legally say that this student qualifies. But
Right.
the body of evidence allows us to gather a wider breadth of evidence to really look at. And if we're identifying students who are English language learners, how fast they acquire English is now looked at. And that's, I think I'm very happy that we're doing that, because that's an element we weren't able to look at in the past. So
Yeah, and there's a difference between high achieving students and gifted and talented students. And sometimes there are groups of people that don't quite understand that. The other thing is, it's interesting because there were, at least when I was doing this, there were basically two philosophies as far as gifted talented. One was going deeper into things and into concepts, and the other one was acceleration. Are you guys favoring one over another at all?
Depends on the age of the student and what, where their interests are. I think the biggest shift we have done both in those areas. I would say acceleration, we've seen some really nice successes with that. We're also using some of the like remote things we learned from COVID, from using like remote learning to be able to provide opportunities for students that might have been more difficult to do in the past, where they could take a course and not have to leave their school or go to a different grade level or something. But the other piece that we're seeing a lot of success is really at the secondary level, is switching gears and not worrying. We used to be, everything was about the area they were gifted in, and then it switched to all the work in their ALP being around the area they had deficit in. And we're kind of switching that now to, what do you want to do? Like, what is your interest area? What is your passion? And then how do we help you grow your gifted area, deal with your deficit area, deal with any affective needs that might be there, but also switching that focus to get buy-in, especially at the high school level, around this should be something that's meaningful for students rather than just some plan that we write. By the time they get to middle and high school, we're really starting to shift that thinking a little bit.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and I've always been fascinated by Finland because they don't have federal funding like we do, but what their system is every kid, whatever they need is what is provided for them. And something like, I don't know, 35% of their kids have special education by the time they graduate, but they're kind of in and out, and it's not quite like we handle things here, but they, if the kid needs something, they provide it, whether it's gifted talent or other special services. They have more freedom than we do.
Yeah. I do think that we have been working really hard at also not looking at this just as this is when I talk about that number 4 for teacher training, things that you're going to do to differentiate for high achieving or gifted learners both are going to help other learners in the classroom.
Yes.
I mean, there's just no doubt that kind of practice is going to help all your learners, just like we know really great ELD strategies help all your learners, right?
Yep.
So hopefully this won't be seen just, the training pieces won't be just, oh, I've got this identified group. It's also about, how do I help all my students and get them all? And we've started opening up that, like Kathy at the middle school has in the past that run like mini camps, and she invites other students to come to those. It's not just for gifted and talented students. I mean, we try to target some students, but we ask, bring a friend, or is there other kids that, that might be interested, and we let them come to those kind of things. So, and we're looking at using advisory to do similar things at the high school as well. So.
Good. Yeah, that's good. Well, when you use differentiated instruction, you're going to meet the kids' needs, whatever they are.
Exactly.
Are you using any of Bertie Kingor's work at all?
I don't know. I'd have to ask. That doesn't seem familiar to me, but I would have to ask.
She has some really good information. She has some good gifted, talented, and differentiated instruction strategies. So something to look into.
Yeah, that'd be great if you don't mind emailing me that name. That would be really good. I know we have a lot of we have a gifted resource person who works with us. Her name is Melanie, who is with the Colorado Department of Ed, but she's also like a consultant, and and we also work really closely with the regional other gifted staff in Thompson Valley, Greeley, Windsor, Poudre School District. And there's a nice regional group there that we partner with a lot to help build our program. And one of the things that's new, I didn't mention it there a minute ago, but Rachel Graham, who I talked about earlier, she's becoming certified. We haven't had a certified gifted and talented staff member in our district providing gifted and talented supports or leadership or consultation or whatever you want to call it, whatever it is. We haven't had that in quite some time, like well over 10 years, probably more than that. And she's about halfway through the program at UNC. And so that's going to be a really big benefit to us. Brian mentioned that grant earlier. We're tapping into that grant to be able to pay for Rachel, and to be able to help her be able to get this certificate through UNC to be able to help us grow our programming side of things, right? So we were working hard on our plans, but that's going to help us grow our programming and our professional development and our coaching and all these other areas that we know we've been wanting to really get to. So excited about that. Stay tuned. There'll be more to come on that as we move along.
Good.
All right, I'm going to switch gears, and I want to this is a much shorter slide deck, but I wanted to kind of just go through just our title, our title, where we are. And like Brian said, these numbers are not firmed up. We're getting preliminary for next year. We have seen a slight decrease in our title funding over the last 2 to 3 years, which we've not felt because we've had carryover and we've been able to kind of just keep carrying money over. It's kind of like pulling out of the savings account. But eventually we might face a point in time where we have to make decisions about, hey, are we going to be able to continue to do these things the way we're doing them? I looked at, when I was preparing for this, I looked at where we were 2 years ago with, for instance, Title I, and we're about 20,000 less now, and as well as on Title II, and I'll show you those in a minute here. But we have seen Title I and Title II, which are our two biggest areas, decline over the last few years, and that's just based on census data and everything, a big formula that's bigger than I understand, but we are seeing some decline in those funds. So we'll be monitoring, nothing dramatic that is program shifting, but it's definitely something to kind of monitor and make sure if we continue to see that we think about long-term what we're doing with our title funding, and is it going to continue to be what we want to be doing. So okay, so we're switching gears from the special ed, from the IDEA and the ESSA, or ECEA, which is the special ed 504 gifted law. We're switching over to the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. And this is what guides, this is federal, this is another side of the federal grants, and this is what guides our title funding district-wide. And so just a couple pieces here. This is something that's administered. We do an application. I fill out an application each year and work with different staff on getting that done. And then we get that approved typically in June or July. And then we're allocated those funds, and then we have to spend them for the most part within a year. We can carry over a little bit, but for the most part, they're really looking at, we're spending that every year based on the allocations we're getting. Our responsibilities under ESSA, as you can see there, are students impacted by different factors, whether it be language, poverty, disability, homelessness is in there. There are a couple other areas. One of the interesting things about this is within Larimer County, you look at things like cost of living and such in Estes Park compared to maybe the same cost of living down in Poudre or Thompson. And we know that it is harder for families to pay the bills in Estes Park. We know housing is more difficult and can be more expensive, and there are other challenges there. So childcare challenges and such. So while that's there, it's not something we are able to really, we don't make a case for that within our application, but it's an awareness we have, and it's awareness that we have to kind of just keep in mind as we talk about these things. Sorry, I think I went through. No, all right. So our biggest title fund is our Title I. And this is basically, these funds are earmarked for our elementary school. You identify a school and based on their poverty level and some other factors. And then once that school is identified, they're allocated the funds to be able to provide services for students in need. And so, as you can see here, we have a couple different things going on. For the most part, at the elementary school, we are doing a targeted assistance model, which those of you who are familiar with the elementary school, we have an intervention model in place that's facilitated through MTSS, where students are identified in the area of reading as well as math, and then they receive different interventions. Some of those happen inside the classroom with their regular classroom teacher, and some of those happen with a pull-out scenario where it could be an intervention teacher, a coach, paraprofessionals will also support in running pull-out types of targeted instruction for students that are below grade level that are identified for those services. And basically, these are students that are not meeting the academic standards. They're significantly below in reading or math for the most part. So there's our breakout. We get just over 100. It's like 300 change, 300,000 and like a few hundred. So I just rounded it up to make it easy per year for services. And you can see here the breakdown is the majority that is going to intervention. And that's not just one person, that's multiple people, as well as paraprofessional support. So just about 3/4 of that money goes towards supporting intervention teachers or staff. We do have a little bit of money set aside for tutoring. That's something we're going to need to relook at as we move forward, because there's a lot of money in ESSER set aside for tutoring. So I would guess by next year, you might see that slice of the pie disappear and get moved somewhere else, because we don't really need to pull tutoring out of this right now. We may need to again in the future, but and when I say tutoring, I mean could be an after school tutoring type of thing. It could be summer. We used it a lot in the past to run summer programming. The school has found lots of different school district and the school have found a lot of different resources to provide summer and tutoring and also during the year types of support. So that would be an area I might see us changing. We'll get feedback and decide, but it's a small slice of the pie, as you can see there. And then we have a data coach who helps facilitate the intervention program, helps build groups, does some teaching, as well as supervising and helping the intervention staff. And then there's always a little tiny bit of money set aside for supplies that might be needed for students receiving services. This is all these dollars are spent at the elementary school. Just to kind of frame that out. So this is pretty much exclusively elementary school here. We do have other supports in other buildings, coaches, some intervention supports. Those are all funded out of general fund or different resources, not through title funding. We do receive a small, whoa, let me go back here, sorry. Sorry about that. We do receive a small, this is probably our area we're seeing the largest decrease over time in perspective to how much we get. This has gone down, over the course of the last few years, but this is money set aside for professional development. It's Title II dollars. And basically, really, a little bit of this money, or basically this is almost broken into 4 quarters. Some of the money's used for providing teacher mentoring. So that's our new teachers. We provide stipends for teachers to mentor them, and they attend meetings together, and that's to help our new teachers get onboarded during their first year with us in our district. And like I said, mainly the funds are used to provide stipends for the teachers that are doing the mentoring, but there's also sometimes a little bit of supplies or books that are involved with that program. And then the rest of the money is divided, dollars are divided evenly between the 3 schools. to provide professional development. You'll see it's not just any, Mary can't go on a trip to Hawaii and become an acupuncturist. Not that she would, but this is all set aside for activities that are aligned with the PD, the strategic plans, the school improvement plans, and they have to be ongoing efforts. That's a big part of what title, when they look at how we're spending our title dollars, that we're doing things that is going to continue. So it's not like, oh, we're going to bring in a training 1 year and then that's it. We never hear about it again. So these are cultural responsive teaching, restorative practices, all the things that you guys have heard over and over again in different ways. These help keep those efforts going. Our curriculum trainings with our newer curriculums or recently adopted curriculums, our continued curriculum training, as well as anything needed for any students, behavioral, mental health trainings. Those are all could be included because they're all part of our district or school planning. We do get a little bit of funding for Title III, and basically we hire a paraprofessional or a staff member to help support Title III, which is our ELL programming across the district, and you can see it covers about a third of a person when you add up salary and benefits together. And then the rest of their salary, we don't hire a third of a person. The rest of their salary and benefits are paid through other funds within the district. And then this area is one of the areas that we've been taking a look at because it's a little bit more difficult to spend, and the area is there's a lot more strings attached to what we do with these dollars. This is our Title IV, and you could it's academic enrichment, and it's a kind of a broad category on one hand, but it also is pretty narrow in what you can do with the money. So the last thing you want to do is do something with federal dollars that you're not supposed to, because that sends up all kinds of alarms. So we've been very hesitant and we've been very careful. It's not a huge pool of money when you look at, in reference to everything else we get, but this is our current status. This is probably one that will be shifting around a little bit too, especially with the introduction of ESSER into our system. But right now we're spending about, we did a lot of mental health training over the last 2 years. So we've used some of the funds for that. The supplies and fees are for students who may be experiencing poverty or homelessness. We're able to use dollars to help them. We've done everything from gas cards to help kids, students get to school, or parents drive students or getting students to school who may not be able to get there. We've done grocery support sometimes for students that are at risk and are, maybe homeless temporarily until they get more secure services in place. Paying fees, athletic fees. I remember Jeff Collins used to go, if a student needed a shirt to participate in something, he would go and buy it, and we would charge, so anything like that falls in those student supplies and fees to support students that might be experiencing poverty or homelessness, AP courses, AP testing fees, all those types of things. And then a big chunk of it, of course, is set aside for staff and student and staff wellness efforts. That's probably the area that we need to work the most on. We have dollars set aside, but we've really haven't dug too deep. Kind of the pandemic put a lot of that on hold. We're more of a survival mode. So hopefully as we get out of this and we start thinking about wellness efforts across the district, we do use it to provide some things already. And we have over the course of the last few years, but it's an area that we want to take a look at, and whether we continue to do that or we look at different opportunities. One of the areas you can use these dollars for, which we haven't yet, is some recruiting. And that might be something we look at too, because it's difficult, as sometimes to hire hard to fill positions. So we may be looking at some different areas for those funds. But that's kind of the current status of where this year's application is. We'll be doing that again here in the next couple months for next year. Okay, I'm gonna maybe stop sharing my screen. Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions or comments? Terry.
Hey, Laszlo, I have a question. I've been teaching a long time and I never know. Haven't ever figured out, or no one's ever told me, where does the title money come from? Is it state money or is it federal money, or where does that come from?
It's a great question. It is actually federal dollars. So the way it works, Terry, is the federal government provides it to CDE. And then the CDE does their own, they do their own calculations to allocate it down to districts, and then they monitor it. So they skim a little off, as everyone for their monitoring efforts. But for the most part, those dollars all pretty much go through directly from the federal entities through the state agencies into the districts. So,
Okay.
yep.
Are there like stipulations that CDE puts on that money for us to follow?
Yeah, a lot actually. There's a lot of backup of what you can do with those dollars in each area. And one of the big areas that makes this tricky is there's a rule called basically says you can't supplant. So you cannot take federal dollars and turn now not this doesn't include ESSER because ESSER is breaking all these rules. But prior to ESSER, and Brian can jump in if he's still on here and correct me if I'm wrong. But prior to ESSER, with these dollars, with title funds, we can't suddenly pay for something that we were paying for already out of our own budget. Does that make sense? So like if we were say we had I'm just gonna make this totally up. Say we had a math intervention teacher at the elementary school that we had been paying for years out of our general fund, and they were providing math intervention. And we decided, you know what, we're gonna pay for that out of title because we're trying to save money in other places, right? We're not allowed to do that because what we'll get is you already were providing that. You can't turn around and say we're going to provide that out of federal dollars. So you get kind of locked in. You have to be very careful. Like, and it's not specifically the amount, but it's how you spend it. So intervention salary might change, and we might go from a higher to a lower salary, but we have to spend that amount. Those dollars or that category can't change from an intervention to a general ed teacher or something like that.
Yeah, it's called supplement, not supplant.
Supplement, not supplant. Thank you.
So we can only use it for supplemental stuff. And then for any entity that receives over $750,000 in federal funds, we have to do a specific audit to look at the use of those funds. It's required by the federal government for oversight. And then we have to submit a separate audit to the state as well as so the Office of the State Auditor and CDE to make sure we're in compliance with all the rules and regs and everything else that's tied to those federal funds. And we've had to do a single audit pretty much every year since I've been here, so the last 11 years. But that also looks at food service, title funds, EC or IDEA, and those types of things. So but they basically go and make sure we're following all the rules and things like that. So there's oversight through audits that the federal government basically makes us do to make sure we're jumping through the right hoops to use those funds.
Hey, Brian, are there specific individuals that are trained to do these audits that you have to use?
Yeah, it's basically, there's governmental accounting standards that they got to follow. So it's the single audit under accounting code is a A133 yellow book audit. So there's a separate guidance, basically it's a yellow book, or it used to be, that you have to follow, and it lays out the procedures and the guidelines and everything that you have to do, and it has to be performed by an independent third party. That's a certified public accountant.
As long as it's a CPA, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, the state cannot do it, so that's why we have to hire a accounting firm to do that.
Right, Julie. Julie, you still have, yeah.
Sorry, fun fact.
Okay.
My previous life, many of them. I used to be a CPA and I used to specialize in single audits for Deloitte and Touche, and do those. And so basically it is an audit to come in to make sure that you have internal controls over your programs, to make sure that your programs are doing what they're supposed to be doing, versus a financial audit, which is making sure that you have the internal controls over your finances to make sure that they're doing what they're doing in addition to your finances being properly stated.
So Julie, then when you get your CPA training, you are trained in both the monetary part as well as like compliance part.
In theory, you usually have one class that deals with that. And then when you go to work for a CPA firm, depending upon what pool you're thrown into, you might get that. I was a CPA in Alaska, where you're pretty much, you do that all year round, because governmental audits and state audits happen in the summer, and financial audits happen more in the winter, because school districts and governments and things like that have year ends that are not January 31st.
Interesting.
So that would be why I am a compliance nerd when it comes to education standards, and like, did my students meet the math standards? Because when I was a CPA, I was a single audit specialist. Like, did the government meet the grant standards and things like that? And in Alaska, we had a lot of native villages, native corporations, not-for-profits, things like that. And did they meet those standards?
Interesting. Okay.
That was a previous life, 25, 30 years ago. So, but like, think of it like that. How do you know that that money went where it was supposed to go? And how do you have the controls over that?
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. I think we're good. And we are, any other things that anybody wants to bring up? Okay. I think we're good that way. Well, I hope that all of you will consider being on this committee next year. Like I said, really appreciate all of your input, all of your questions, your best thinking. It's just been really helpful. So thank you. Just know that you're appreciated. Let's put it that way. So, okay. Any other comments for the good of everybody? Okay, this is our last year. I mean, our last one for this school year. So is there a motion to adjourn? You want to stay on all evening? Wow.
I move that we adjourn.
Do we have a second? A second. Thanks, Terry and John. Okay, all of those in favor, give me a thumbs up, please. Okay. I think we're good. All right, you guys, then just thank you presenters. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Laszlo. And the rest of you, enjoy the rest of the evening. And and for some of you, I won't see until maybe next year. So enjoy summer too, when that comes around. So, all right. And thanks again, for all of you. You really are appreciated for all that you do. The committee members, the presenters, all of you. So thank you. All right.
Thanks, Bev.
Thanks, Bev.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.